Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is part 6 in our story entitled Shards of the Moon. Chapter 6. Let's get straight into that. By the time they had loaded their loot into the Humvee, the sun had already started to make its way across the middle of the sky, which is far later out than Rada had intended or hoped. But at least there was a safe house close. The vehicle crept through the remainder of the block, back out the way they had came before the open road east lay ahead of them. Before long, they were back up to speed and cruising along the dilapidated highway, but the road was still smooth under the suspension of the rugged vehicle. "So, where are we headed now?" Madison asked over the howling wind against the windows of the truck. "To a little place up the road with some more supplies," Rada answered with a bit of a smirk. She would never expect that he was ever about to She would never expect that he was about to show her. In the wavy distance of the afternoon sun, she could see that there was a few dark spots on the horizon. Gleaming shapes. As they approached, she could see that there was a sea of old cars, dented, torn apart and rusted. A vehicle graveyard blocking their road, but even as they came close to their approach, the Humvee wasn't slowing down. If anything, it seemed to be gaining speed. Madison looked at Rada, who looked back with only a smile. "You trust me?" Rada asked. She watched him for a moment, trying to discern what he meant, what he could be meaning to do, and after that moment Rada looked back again and gave his seatbelt a signalling tug. She instantly tightened hers down. "Then trust me. Hang on," Rada said with another smile right before he pushed the transmission down a gear and pushed on the throttle. The beast of a truck roared as he instantly boosted forward with the power gaining speed, then a low growl of the truck shifting up again, but still picking up pace, screaming down the highway towards the metal death trap of cars. Madison's whole body tensed up. Her hands gripped whatever they could tightly, and had to close her eyes just as they were about to hit. But no hit came. She could still hear the roaring of the engine, and felt a sudden jerk to the left. But when she opened her eyes to see what had happened, nothing had improved. The vehicles were now all around them, passing by at blurring pace. The wide truck was being threaded between the perfectly spaced cars, as Ryder guided it through with a practiced skill that even offered a chuckle of fun to the whole experience. Still, the car carcasses went by at a blinding pace before seemingly impassable wall of them came up in blistering half seconds. A quick jerk of the wheel to the right brought the speeding Humvee off the road and onto an angled crown with an utmost confidence. Off to the sides, she could see here that the sea of cars went on, and they were all flocked here. But why? Then, after a few more seconds, back up onto the road, to a narrowly slot through a chain-link fence and tiny booth at its threshold. The road was clear after that, and Rada smiled, letting the Humvee wind back down to a manageable speed, before turning to Madison, whose hand had been gripping his arm the entire time. Madison was pale with a sudden scare and breathing fast, and eyes locked ahead of them. Rada couldn't help but laugh as he asked if she was all right. Her response was a firm hit to his arm, followed by a "Don't ever do that again." The highway was long and slow due to the torn up road and disused cars. It took another hour to reach something in the distance. The Humvee was now approaching a huge structure, some kind of hangar. A rusted sign sat outside, its large concrete parking pad read Nellis AFB. Then some jumble of numbers that didn't seem to make any sense at all. They were parked in front of a large set of doors that looked impenetrable, though between the chips and burns marked all over them, it looked more like It looked like more than a few have tried. Rada unbuckled his seatbelt and slid out of the truck, heading for a small box on a post just outside of it. The box looked like it's seen its fair share of abuse as well, from others attempting to make their way into the building, but to no avail. With the key from his truck, Rada unscrewed the panel's face and pulled it aside, revealing a mess of internal wiring, some of which was neat and uniform, and some of which looked home done and modified. There was even an egg timer worked into the mix. "What is all that?" Madison asked, having made her way over to see just what he was up to. "Just unlocking the door." He chuckled back, before he twisted a few wires together and turned the egg timer once to where it ticked quietly. Then he was quick to replace the panel with the screws, but nothing appeared to be happening. Then a faint flicker, a spark across this tiny screen, and then a few quick flashes of numbers and letters in code, before finally coming up with a simple fixation, PWD, and a blinking line. Rada was about to start typing on its small metal keypad, but stopped and turned to Madison. "Sorry, I hate to ask, but would you mind turning away for a moment? Security, you see." Madison quickly looked away, only hearing a few of the keys as he typed them in. "Okay, that's it," Rada said, starting the short trot back to the Humvee. "That's it? What now?" Madison asked. She was confused. The door was still very clearly shut. Rada only chuckled a bit before facing the door. He held his right hand to his left side, then swept it across his view of the door in a very grandiose fashion, his voice loud and authoritative. "Open sesame!" She would have asked just what he was doing, but half a second after his words had ended, a spinning light next to the door started up, flashing red, and then heavy doors creaked and slid open slowly, pushing aside the dirt and debris that had been building up in front of them. The light only penetrated slightly into the dark building, but she could tell that there was a lot more to it. The door settled with a boom after they opened, and Rada turned to Madison with a smile, but she looked back with a bit of confusion. "Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. Your parents never told you that one?" Rada asked. Madison shook her head, oblivious to whatever he was talking about. "Right. I'm sorry, that's quite a bit before your time." Rada laughed a little before climbing back into the Humvee and starting it up. Just inside of the building, Rada turns off the truck again and gets out, walking through the darkness as if he had always been there and knew exactly where everything was. Madison suddenly feels very alone as she climbs out of the truck and onto the stable floor of the building. She could hardly see much yet, as her eyes hadn't adjusted from the light outside, but from what she could see through the doorway's light was enough to show a small gun rack with a few matching weapons sitting up against it, some of the things scattered about. Then a sound she knew all too well, the high-pitched whirring and sudden roar of a generator starting up. Suddenly a loud click rang out, and overhead lights lit up each with their own hearty click, illuminating the enormous room. That gun rack, it wasn't alone. The whole wall right to the end was lined with similar weapons, more guns than she had ever seen in her entire life. There were benches of weapons, helmets, body armors, tools, just massive amounts of ordnance and materials. It was a veritable goldmine for self-defense. "Wow, this is all yours?" Madison asked, looking around at everything. "Well, not exactly mine. It belonged to the government when there was still one, but if you believe, like most these days, finders keepers, then yeah, it's all mine. Seems like you could sell a lot of this and live like a king," she said, before approaching the bench where Rada had seated himself, gathering things. "That sounds like a Bartertown childhood for sure. I could, but honestly, the only thing these are good for is one person killing another. They won't stop a monster, so what point is there besides making money and condemning more of the mankind?" Rada asked. "That's a good point," Madison said before turning back. "Here, I've got something I want to show you," Rada said, standing up from the bench and signalling over to her towards the open door. They were both walked back outside to the bright burning afternoon and around to the corner of the building to a very long yard. with simple paper silhouettes of people on the far side of it. It was a firing range. She had seen these before, but none so nicely kept. Usually there were cans on a fence or other simplistic designs. "You said your dad taught you how to shoot a gun, right?" Ryder asked, turning to her. "Yeah, but nothing like that revolver or anything," Madison responded. "Don't put yourself down. You did really well considering. It's a lot of pistol to handle, even for a seasoned shooter. Here, I've got something for you," Ryder said, pulling from his pocket a small handful of a black pistol. "You might be more accustomed to how a pistol like this works. This is a Beretta M9. It fires 9mm rounds, which are plentiful wherever a good cache or handloader is, and can hold 15 of them in a magazine. It's a military spec pistol and is the last sidearm of the United States military. It's a great starter pistol, easy to handle and fire, but unfortunately, as you can see," Ryder said as he turned and took aim with it, firing a few rounds down the range that peppered a white paper target in the distance, "it lacks stopping power." Now, Ryder places the pistol down on the desk at the front of the firing range before pulling out another pistol, this one much larger and fuller, with a silvery colour as opposed to the first overall black colour. "This is something I think you should learn to handle. This is the peak of pistol mechanics. The Colt 1911, or Colt Government. It fires a much larger round, a 45 ACP. Because of that, it only holds 7 rounds, but," Ryder said as he turned back to the target and took aim, "this time, instead of a small pop of the previous pistol, this had an eardrum clenching blasts and was ripping holes through the downrange target. Here, I want you to try," Ryder said, signalling over to her. Gingerly, Madison made her way to the bench and took the warm pistol from his hands, feeling its weight, its balance. "Now, I've already fired 3. You have 4 left to go. Go ahead and waste them," Ryder said. Before stepping back, Madison took aim with both hands just as she remembered and lined up the sights. Her breathing slowed as she took a bit in anticipation of the recoil, and as she squeezed the trigger, all the surprise came out of her in a quiet yelp. The ripped roar of the pistol, the kick of the force, and a large hole in the paper target. She had missed the outline, but this was only the first attempt. Not bad. This time, keep both your eyes open so you can see it better," Ryder remarked. The second and the third shot came a lot closer. She was getting a feel of the recoil now, full of way it moved and reacted to her. The fourth shot was right on target in the silhouette's upper body, but she couldn't fire anymore. The gun's mechanism had locked in place. That's one of the best parts about this gun. It's designed so that when the magazine is empty and your last shot is fired, the slide locks in place. By doing this, it both gives the shooter a visible sign that the gun is empty and speeds up the reload cycle. "Go ahead and eject the clip. It's that little button under your thumb," Ryder said as he approached with a push of it. The clip came out, sliding out into her hand, empty. In Ryder's, as it extended to her, was another fresh clip. "Go ahead and slap this one in," he said. This part was new to her, but she could figure it out. The clip slid in smoothly, but didn't want to stay in. "You have to fight the spring, give it a whack," Ryder instructed. She slapped her palm up into the clip, knocking it and locking it into place. "Ouch," she said, shaking the palm that hurt a bit from how hard she had hit it. "Okay, now there's a lever there near the rear and the slide. Push that down," Ryder said. With her thumbs, she was able to force the lever down, and the slide quickly slips right back into place. "There. Now, when you do that, the first round is chambered, and the hammer is pulled. You're ready to keep firing." With a lot of practice, reloads for something like this can be done in a blink of an eye. You don't want to keep it like that, though. Put your thumb on the hammer there, real tight, and pull the trigger. You can let it down easy so it won't fire. There you go. Nice and easy, Ryder said, as she had slowly let the hammer down like a professional. Perfect. Now Now, it's good to store. You'll have to pull it again if you want to fire though. It's a single action, Ryder explains. Well, I think you're doing just fine with that, so we won't use any more daylight or bullets. You can keep that. I'll grab you a few more magazines. Can't hurt to have, right? They didn't stay much longer, as the sun was 3/4 of the way across the sky now. Ryder opened and twisted the egg timer back to off, and the panel shut down, still looking as if it had been sitting there untouched for years. The generator inside soon puttered out as the batteries in it was charging reached full again, as it was designed to do. Once again, they were on the long road back to Boulder City, and back to their lives. It almost seemed like this trip was shorter than it actually was, but Madison was glad that she had come. She had seen a number of things, taken a few photos with her new camera, but most interestingly was that this man that was with her, this man that she knew was also a monster, had been so kind and nice, had been so caring and interesting his whole time with her. He gave her a weapon and showed her how to use it. He showed her his little hideaway and cache of equipment that men would kill for. He had shown her little tricks for survival and what to look for to protect herself. Her whole notion and idea of monsters was turned on its head, really. Were all of them just normal people during the day? And just as she had made her way through all these thoughts, she saw the sea of cars on the approach again, with the remnants of Vegas quickly past. Had it already been an hour back? Again? She felt the Humvee speeding up, the engine starting to pick up speed. He certainly either seemed to enjoy doing this slalom or enjoyed seeing her being scared. Ryder, don't, she said as she gripped the interior of the rugged truck again. Don't think we can make it again. I've done this 100, Ryder started. The noise was deafening. The spray of glass, the feel of the wind forcing into the vehicle's cab, and the air shake from the high-caliber bullet making its home right beneath Ryder's collarbone. He was jolted back in his seat from the impact and slumped forward against the steering wheel, crying out in pain. The next few seconds were a blur. She knew she had screamed, and had screamed his name, but she couldn't hear herself. The sea of twisted metal was on the fast approach, and Ryder forced himself to turn the wheel and step on the brakes to avoid it. The Humvee slid with the squealing tyres off the road and onto the steep embankment, where its centrifugal force caused the vehicle to start to turn. Madison felt the seatbelt gripping her tightly as gravity changed its orientation violently. The vehicle was now rolling. Wow. Hope you guys enjoyed that chapter also. Of course, please do let me know down below, guys, what you think. Always love reading through your comments. Always very much appreciated. Please, of course, do like and share. And remember, folks, be safe, not sorry.